close the schools down because that's what the CDC and the governor said, where every private school around us proved that that was not necessary at all. The children, face-to-face, that's what we need, and hopefully that's the direction we're going in. I'm hoping tonight the big debate that we're going to have is on masks. I could throw statistics out. I can tell you that in York County you have 0.008 where every private school around us proved that that was not necessary. I could also tell you in the state of Virginia, 80% of all the children in the state of Virginia face to 60 years and older. That's what we need. And I can also tell you that's the same demographic. I'm hoping tonight the big debate that we're going to have is on masks. But those numbers aren't important. Statistics out. I can tell you that in York County you have 0.008 masks on our children. Where every private school around us proved. When's the last time you saw? I can also tell you in the state of Virginia, 80% of all the children in the state of Virginia face to face, and they were dealing, and I can also tell you that's the same demographic. It came out of a box tonight. The big debate that we're going to have is on masks. So if the masks aren't being statistics out, I can tell you that in York County you have 0.008 on our children. Where every private school around us proved. When's the last time you saw? I can also tell you as well. I'm knocking on 54 and I can't wear the mask all day long, and I'm glad that I'm in a position where I don't have to wear that mask, especially with people that wear glasses. Those of you that wear glasses, you know what it's like to have to wear it. But statistics have shown the masks, did they really make a difference? At one point, the CDC, we don't need masks, and they said we do need masks. And then they said, okay, now we don't need masks, we can go out again. We can go to a restaurant, we have to wear a mask, but once we sit down, we can take it off, because apparently once you get to this elevation, COVID is no longer affected. And then they put us back on airplanes, right? So we wear a mask on an airplane until they start passing out the peanuts and the popcorn, and then all of a sudden you can take that mask off. So now you're at 39,000 feet on a tube with 200 other people and your mask is off. So where's the sanity in that? If it was really a measure that really needed to be done, we would be wearing these masks all the time. But it seems like this is just something to appease the public. It's a popular and it's an easy choice to make. So what I'm challenging each of you to do is be a leader. Be what most of us came to York County for, which was leadership. Because so many people get involved in our local governments today, and I don't want to pretend to know your job, and I don't want to say it was easy, but getting on a school board and just sitting there and following what Newport News and Hampton does is not acceptable to me, and it shouldn't be acceptable to anybody in this room. Because last year you made that decision to shut down the schools before you even talked to the parents. You said you were going to do exactly what Hampton and York and Newport News did. So just be a leader. Lead us through this and do what you know and what everyone in here knows is the right thing to do. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Ms. Lisa Legaspi.
Hi, I'm Lisa Legaspi. I have grandchildren at Magruder Elementary. I've already graduated. I'm their guardian. I'm the one that takes them to school, does their homework with them, et cetera. And I've already graduated 4 kids from Bruton between 2006 and 2014. And I love York County schools, and I would like my grandchildren to continue at York County schools.
I'm sorry, I didn't get it right. Could you please state your address?
Oh, 271 Princess Place.
Thank you.
Williamsburg. So since a lot of people want to talk, I'm just going to tell you how I feel when I wear a mask, because I hate wearing a mask. I feel anxious. I feel eager to take it off. I hate going shopping when I have to wear a mask in the store. I just want to get out. I can't see. My glasses fog up. I can't hear when people are talking to me, and I feel discombobulated. I don't know if that's normal, but that's my experience with wearing a mask. I hate grocery shopping in a mask. I can't imagine having my young children wearing a mask all day at school trying to learn. But anyway, I'm not a good speaker, so I'm going to move on to this great study I have, this great article I have here. I have several copies if anyone wants to get one from me. So the summary of the article is this: children do not readily acquire COVID. They spread it to other. They do not spread it to other children or teachers or endanger parents or others at home. This is settled science. In rare cases where a child does contract COVID, it is very unusual for the child to get sick or die. As has already stated, there's not a risk to the children. They don't transfer it to adults. They don't bring it home to us. I am very, very sorry for the children who are afraid, but I don't want to live in fear. I don't want my children to live in fear, and I don't want my grandchildren to live in fear. I want them to go to school embracing life and experiencing a real vibrant, dynamic education where their teachers can talk to them and interact with them, and they can interact with their fellow students. Their bus driver, we have the best bus driver in my neighborhood, Miss Cole, and I can't imagine them getting on the bus every day without being able to interact with her and see her smiling face like they have been in the past. Most influenza viruses, well, I already talked about that, the low infection rate. So why are we having this reaction? Because of the messaging we're getting all the time. It's instilling fear in us and our children, and it's not right. We need to stand up and be brave and show them how to live a life, a full life. Children also have special things in their noses where they can't get, the infection can't go. Their immune systems are strong. This article has 25 citations. If you want to look it up online, you can click through and see all the data that suggests that these children are not going to get sick and die, and they're not going to pass it to us. And the masks are an overreaction that we can stand up against. We don't have to follow the flock. And in conclusion, if the possible harms of wearing a mask outweigh the negligible and questionable benefit in such a low-risk group, then why must they wear masks indoors and outdoors? Masks in children with such zero risk of transmission and illness. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Ms. Lindsay Fogarty.
Hi, my name is Lindsay Fogarty. I live at 215 Toysey Crescent. I cannot take my mask off. I live with multiple rare diseases. As you can tell, I have a central line, so I can't take it off, sorry. My child is going into 3rd grade. He also has the same rare diseases I have. In 2019, I woke up from a nap with a collapsed lung. That is how serious our rare disease is. So while everyone here is talking about how healthy children are, my child is not. We live in a society, and societies are built on a collective cooperation on collective good. I know you all are aware of the responsibility that we have to take care of children. And the idea that a school board of people with no medical expertise is responsible for the safety of these children, it doesn't make any sense unless you're following the guidelines put in place by the CDC. My opinion doesn't matter. My child's experience is different than every child here, just like their experience is different than my child. I beg you, please follow the guidelines put in place by the CDC. They're there for a reason. They are the experts for a reason. You are good at your job, I'm good at mine, and they are good at theirs. I will not pretend to know everything they do, and I would ask of you not to pretend to know what they know. And I would also, before I sit back down, I would like to thank every York County teacher. My grandmother was a teacher in York County for 30 years, and she is now retired. The teachers are doing a very wonderful job with the students. My son adores his special education teacher. She is wonderful. He adored his 2nd grade teacher. And I would love for him to be able to actually meet teachers in person. That's all. Thank you for your time.
Our next speaker is Mr. Kenneth Green.
Hey, good evening. My name's Kenneth Green. I live at 714 Dandy Loop Road. I got 3 kids that's been in the York County school system they're going to Seaford this year, and this should be about the kids. And I wanted to perpetuate the idea that I believe that we should allow the use of masks to be optional. We're not asking anybody to, we're not asking anybody to not wear a mask, but I think it's borderline ridiculous that we make it mandatory. So this seems to be a heavy burden to lay at the feet of our children. My kids, I've seen it the last year and a half. I've seen the summertime without it. They've gone and done, they've played, they've interacted, they've had sleepovers, they've had play dates, they've had church activities, they've had all this. They are fine. But I'm not telling anybody not to wear a mask. If they have immunodeficiencies, I'm not going to mandate that they don't wear a mask. I mean, the world's big enough for everybody. And I say that the idea of us saying that we're going to burden our children with something that's already been said, they're not super spreaders. The media wants us to believe that. They're not. They have low infection rates. And the CDC would probably say that maybe 40 to 50% of school-age kids in America may have already had it, gotten over it, and it's been a done deal for them. So the idea is that mask wearing for our kids, my kids, I can speak for my kids, it's been cumbersome and it's been tough to keep, they have a hard time keeping their hands off their mask. They're always adjusting it. My wife does a really good job about keeping masks changed out. We use not paper mask, but the cloth mask. They don't even mandate what kind of mask you're supposed to wear. You can put a pair of underwear up on your face, and they say, okay, well, you can come on in. It's like, what in the world, you know? So, but you know what? If one pair of underwear don't work, put 2 pairs of underwear on your face. If that makes you feel good, I'm okay with that, and I'm not going to dog you out. I'm going to just say that I'm okay with that. If you want to wear a bra or underwear on your face, if you want to wear an N95, I'm not saying that that's wrong for you. I know for me and my kids, my experience, it's cumbersome. They've had a hard time with it. And I'll just tell you that if we're going to keep this about the kids, then I would just say, I would reiterate the idea that influenza has been a lot harder on kids. When we've had bad influenza years in the past, they didn't mandate masks then. They let our kids die. What do? We encourage good hygiene. We encourage stay out of people's faces. We encourage to stay home if you have a fever in the last 24 hours. We're smart parents. We can do this. So the idea is that I want to remind the school board that kids are unique. Their faces are unique. Don't cover them. We don't want to be a bunch of mindless stormtroopers walking around. The idea, let's let the individuality of the kids shine. We want to see those faces. We want to interact. When you cover the faces, it's a lot easier to strip them of their inalienable, godly given rights because they just look like a sheet. They just look like a person with no emotion. It has caused issues with my middle child, which is very social, to not be able to interact as well as she could. And it's just been tough. So I would encourage you, don't make it mandatory. Make it an option. You know,
Thank you, Mr. Green.
I thank you.
Next speaker is Ms. Kristen Woodard.
Kristen Woodard, 108E Heather Way. School board members, Dr. Shandor, and administrative leaders, thank you for adopting and adjusting policies in the 2020-2021 school year. You maximized in-person learning, but also kept the health and safety of staff and children at the forefront. As a YCSD educator and parent of an elementary and a secondary student, I can attest to the overall positive experiences and learning that we have the data to show for that we were able to accomplish last year. Was it perfect? Absolutely not. No one is saying it was. However, the plans that YCSD put in place and continuously revised based on public health metrics kept our community healthy. I strongly encourage YCSD to continue to use the public health metrics to determine when and if masking and social distancing are necessary for students and staff. I do not expect for our school division to make these decisions based on political views and the feelings of our community. Instead, use the data that teachers use every day to make decisions and the recommendations presented by the Peninsula Health Department, the Virginia Department of Health, and also the CDC. Furthermore, as an educator, I ask that you make these decisions based on the data and not put educators in the place to enforce families' decisions about mask wearing. This will take away from valuable instructional time and have negative effects on our classroom climate and communities that we work so hard to build. I look forward to the day when we're not concerned about the transmission of COVID-19 in our community. But until then, I hope that our school board and administrative team will make decisions to keep the students and staff safe, even if that means wearing a mask a little bit longer. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Next speaker is Mr. David Thedford.
David Thetford, 108 Tannenbark Trail, Yorktown, Virginia. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I do appreciate this tonight. I am not in favor of our kids wearing masks. I know that I have a son that's getting ready to go into his junior year, and last year was very difficult on him having to wear a mask. It caused anxiety, definitely gave him a lot of headaches and stuff like that. And, from our governor, through different leaders, different medical people, from our president, we've heard follow the science, follow the science. So I want to give you just a few statistical facts and quotes from the science. Dr. Marguerite Gries-Brism, MD, PhD, who is one of Europe's leading neurologists and neurophysiologists, said this, and I quote, "The rebreathing of our exhaled air without a doubt creates oxygen deficiency and a flooding of carbon dioxide. We know that the human brain is very sensitive to oxygen deprivation." So I ask you, is this a good time when our kids' brains are still developing, when our kids' brains are growing, that we want to deprive it of oxygen? I think that's a question that you're going to have to answer. Another study, in a July 1st, 2021, just recently, a report by the American Medical Association said this. The study said that measured carbon dioxide levels in children ages 6 to 17 while wearing masks. The normal content of carbon dioxide in the air is 400 parts per million, with anything above 2,000 parts per million considered unacceptable. So remember that number, 2,000. When they did the study, after 10 minutes of breathing, the parts were 13,120 parts per million. So once again, I ask you, do we want to deprive our kids of oxygen and be able to breathe freely at a time when their brains are developing? Another study from the Mayo Clinic says that once a mask gets wet, it really begins to decrease in effectiveness of filtering out any sort of respiratory particulate matter. Professor Yvonne Cossart of the Department of Infectious Disease at the University of Sydney said this, "Masks are only effective if they are dry. Masks become non-consequential and do not function after 20 minutes due to saturation. So by my calculations, kids who are in school 8 hours a day will need 24 masks a day to be able to change masks every 20 minutes for the mask to remain effective." So I hope that you'll really consider the fact that the kids need to be able to breathe freely for their physical health and then also for their social health as well, as many people have already stated, about being able to see their friends and be able to smile. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Ms. Linda Fairman.
Hi, I'm Linda Fairman and live in the Tabb District of York County on Galaxy Way. I've been an educator since 1982 and a YCSD teacher since 2003. Tonight, I ask you to vote against mandatory masking for the coming school year. Many experts in virology and epidemiology and the National
Institute one more time? Could you please state your address one more time? I'm sorry.
Okay, it's Galaxy Way,
What address?
111. I prefer not to do that because that shows everybody, if they're watching on TV, that I'm now here and not at home. So that's kind of a safety issue.
We don't know who else is at home.
All right. May I begin again?
Yes, you may get.
Are you
begin again.
restarting? Because
You may
it's still
restart the
clicking
time,
off.
please.
All right. I've been an educator since 1982 and a YCSD teacher since 2003. Tonight, I ask you to vote against mandatory masking for this coming school year. Many experts in virology and epidemiology and the National Institute of Health have reported scientific evidence that masking does not prevent anyone from getting or passing this virus, since its size is much smaller than the mask spaces. Science reports fluid dynamics actually causes droplets captured in masks to be aerosolized and travel over 7 times as far and at greater speeds through the masks and around the edges. There are serious health problems associated with constant mask wearing, like at school. The University of Florida conducted a test of new and cleaned masks worn just one school day and discovered 11 dangerous bacteria and toxins in the mask being inhaled. A study in the Journal of the American Medical Association Pediatrics section found that children wearing a mask in just 3 minutes increased the inhaled carbon dioxide levels to 6 times the level acceptable for an adult, and we're making them wear it for hours. This is physical child abuse. Masking in schools has prevented our children from learning needed language and social skills, from watching mouth formations and facial expressions. This is academic child abuse. For 18 months, adults have continuously told children that they are dangerous, that they will kill their grandparents and their teachers unless they are constantly masked and kept at a distance, all without any data to justify this accusation. This is mental child abuse. The American Institute for Economic Research stated that child suicide rates have increased and far exceeded COVID deaths for children, quoting CDC Director Redfield. The National Alliance of Mental Illness Helpline reported a 65% increase in contacts during these mandates. This is child abuse. Regarding the CDC, they lied for decades about Agent Orange, harming millions of veterans and their children. Can we really trust their recommendations for our children? Some comment that York isn't in a bubble since many travel throughout the peninsula. So here are the current area numbers for the past week, and I'll brief this. York County has 63 cases, 0 hospitalizations, 0 deaths. For our population, that's 0.09%, even though they rate it as high. For the entire peninsula, that's Hampton, everybody, 316
Thank you, Ms.
cases,
Fairman.
8 hospital deaths, and it all comes to 0.07%.
Chairman, your 3 minutes has been allotted. Thank you.
Thank you. Please vote no.
Our next speaker is Ms. Robin Field.
Good evening, Board. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak here tonight. I think Linda Fairman did a great job
If you can
in
please state
a lot
your
of
address,
statistics.
please.
I'm at 109 Chinaberry Way, Yorktown. I just want to say in support of the children that I've raised as a parent, or my grandchildren, the children in my neighborhoods, we have had discussion on how they feel with these masks, and I know this isn't about feelings, but on top of the CDC guidance that we seem to want to follow, I have to ask which guidelines, because they've gone back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. When you have science telling you whether or not a mask is healthy, it's only one data. That's all. It doesn't go back and forth. It doesn't change. Even the children, you know, when you ask them how they feel with the mask, how are you doing in school today, you can see the frown on their face. It's very saddening. It just takes a little bit of common sense with the actual science that says masks are not healthy. Our children should not be wearing them. If there are children that are concerned, or their parents are concerned, the teachers are concerned about actually safety reasons, please, by all means, we want to make sure that you're comfortable in your health. But please do not stop us in making the decision for our children. The schools were shut down last year. The children did not do as well. I was with with my grandchildren much of the time. When my granddaughter would be on the computer for maybe 30 minutes a day, maybe. Now that doesn't allow for a proper education. Fortunately, she's very articulate, very intelligent, but there are children out there that have struggled this year because of it. That should not be purported onto our children. I believe that masks should be an option. Do not mandate this. Do not shut down our schools, because a lot of children will be moving from, you know, whether it's going to actual homeschooling or private school. We moved here so we could have our children in York County schools that we grew up in. Please don't make us leave.
Our next speaker is Robin Custer.
Hello, I'm Robin Custer, 205 Linfoot Court, Williamsburg, Virginia. And I'm here, and I hope everybody can hear this video. We talk about the experts that are telling us what to do, and it goes from one thing to the next thing to the next thing. And the video of Dr. Fauci telling us that masks don't work. It's out there. If people would research it and find out for themselves that he tells you, and it's actually ridiculous because people will play with their mask and they make it worse. They did say to quit messing with your mask, but people play with it all the time. So you're touching it and you're going off and touching other stuff. The day that there is no proof that these masks work, and there are, if people would read the side of the surgical mask box, it tells you, I have a picture of it on my phone, that they do not protect against COVID-19 or other viruses. They are for bacteria, period. And we need to stop this. And I had my daughter kept home last year. She went in for the first 2 days, and she complained of headaches. I kept her home. I could hear all the crap going on at school, the enforcing of the mask, after I even emailed her principal telling her how they don't work. And I heard her the next morning get on the loudspeaker and tell these students to properly wear their mask, as I can watch her science teacher pull it down below her face. The teachers are walking around without them, but the students are being told to keep them on, don't touch their friends, stay away from them, put bacteria, oh, you touched each other. My whole entire neighborhood of kids were playing but without distancing, with their faces not covered last year, starting in April 2020. But they go to the school building and tell each other to be afraid of each other and stay away from each other. That is absolutely disgusting. And it's a time to leave it up to the parents. I have watched and I have heard you guys teach social health to my child as you're telling them to cover their face and stay away from each other. That is absolutely hypocrisy at its best. When is actions speak louder than words? Your words mean nothing when you're enforcing and telling them opposite. And I would like to close with Mark 9:42. And whosoever shall offend one of these little ones that believe in me, it is better for him that a millstone were hanged about his neck and he were cast into the sea. If you are God-fearing people, you will leave this and give this, please, back the right of the parents to make the decision on what's best for their children. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Jason Rusian.
Yes, good evening, school board. My name is Jason Rosine, 201 Ilex Drive. Now, I currently have 4 children in York County schools, all right? Thank God, only 2 of them were in elementary school at the time. Thank God for my mom, who would actually come home while I was at work to watch the kids while they were in school. But every day I got to come home and see their sad little faces when they would tell me that they didn't learn anything. They were in 2nd grade, and all they did the entire year was go over 1st grade curricula. They were bored, completely bored, okay? And the number of times they got yelled at for fidgeting with their mask, which it's an 8-year-old child. How do you prevent that? You can't. Not to mention most other people here actually already touched on all the points I was going to make as far as statistics and the facts that masks do not work. They don't. Plain and simple. You can look at data from other countries. Germany, they wore masks, or they had mask mandates before this thing even kicked off, before they even had a spike in it. And you know what? They still had a spike. It didn't stop anything. Look at every single European country who instilled this mask mandate. It didn't do anything. Nothing. COVID hit where it wanted to hit when it wanted to hit. Sometimes it was delayed, but it all came to the same conclusion, period. And not to mention, how many studies do we have about, yes, the bacteria on masks? Again, that was touched on before. The amount of bacteria on a mask worn after 8 hours, it's astounding. And you're talking about meningital, deadly bacteria that is right there. When it gets into a concentrated enough amount, it is deadly for a child, period. COVID. Dr. Walensky herself, the director of the CDC, came out July 20th and stated that there were 400 children in the U.S. that have died of COVID. That is a shame. To have a child die, yes, absolute shame. However, I believe all of them had underlying circumstances. 2018, car accidents. Over 636 children, 12 and under, died in car accidents. That's 2.5 times more likely to die in a car accident than of COVID. So should we just not drive to school because it's so dangerous? If you want to look at stats, look at stats. It's more dangerous to drive to school than to be in school with COVID. Does that make any sense whatsoever? So these mask mandates are ridiculous. Leave it. It is a parent's responsibility for the health and safety of their children, not the state's. Leave it in the parent's hands. We know what is best for our children, period. We do. I have 4 healthy kids, and I plan to keep them that way. Children alone, when they're born, what do? They stick everything they can in their mouth to get antibodies. They are literally born to destroy viruses, to get antibodies. Let them do that. They're still young enough to do that. So let's not interfere. If you are scared, mask your kids. I'm not going to dictate that. We have a few people here that I completely agree with you. If you have underlying conditions, do what you have to do to keep it safe. But don't bring down every other child, because these things are horrible for psychologically. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Sarah Gillette. Is Sarah Gillette here? Okay, we'll move on. Our next speaker, Gregory Gillette. Gregory Gillette. James Leach.
I'm James Leach, 502 Meadowfield Road in Yorktown. My older child in my God-fearing family truly did struggle last year during remote learning. But a mask mandate is not equivalent to a closed school. It's the opposite. I want to give kudos to those who advocate following science and data that is current and up to date. I want to point out some points that occurred to me as other people were speaking. CDC guidance has changed, continues to change, and the CDC's been upfront about that fact and has said it will be so as they've learned more of this new disease and as the situation has changed. So the fact that CDC guidance changes is actually a positive. COVID is deadlier than the flu. Death and hospitalization are not the only issues from COVID. MIS is another issue. Long-haul COVID is an issue. Studies that assert kids cannot get COVID or cannot pass it along are at best outdated and are no longer correct. I'm really amazed that some of the arguments I've heard are wearing masks is hard, so we shouldn't do it. That's a very odd position for people to take, I think. The thing is, rights and liberty have always had some limits to them in this country. They've never been completely unlimited. Wearing masks and preventing the spread of socially communicated diseases, in other words, transmissible diseases, is a shared responsibility. When you're wearing a mask, you're not simply wearing it for yourself. You're not even simply wearing it for your family. You're wearing it for those around you in case you have it already, to prevent you spreading it. As far as the surgical masks, even Dr. Fauci will say, yes, they alone are not sufficient. They're really for droplets, not for COVID. Wear a double filtered mask Generally, cloth is better. Last thing I'll say is safe school guidelines and recommendations have always included mask wearing as one tool in the toolkit. If you want open schools, then mask wearing is an appropriate measure to get there, because closed schools really suck. Thanks.
I'd like to remind everyone to please stay silent so everybody can have their time uninterrupted at the podium. Our next speaker is Ms. Kristen Fletcher.
Hi, my name's Kristen Fletcher, and I'm at 2802 Seaford Road, Yorktown. So, I'm not a great speaker. I hate getting up in front of people, but I am here for the sake of my daughter and her livelihood ultimately. So, here I am, and I'm just going to read off because that public speaking thing isn't great. So, masks are unnecessary and even detrimental to your health and our children's health. A recent review of peer-reviewed medical literature on mask wearing examined the impact on human health, both immunological as well as physiological. In this meta-analysis, face masks were found to have no detectable effect against transmission of viral infections. It found compared to no masks, there was no reduction of influenza-like illnesses, cases, or influenza from masks in the general population, nor in healthcare workers. The 2020 meta-analysis found that evidence was from randomized controlled trials of face masks did not support a substantial effect on transmissions of laboratory-confirmed influenza, either when worn by infected persons or by persons in the general community to reduce their susceptibility. Another recent review found that masks had no effect specifically against COVID-19. Therefore, we can reasonably conclude the risk to humanity from not wearing masks is minimal to the point of non-existent. Conversely, the wearing of masks does present a number of risks to health, some of them serious. A 2018 study found that healthcare workers' surgical masks also were measured by personal bioaerosol samplers to harbor for influenza virus. Various respiratory pathogens were found on the outer surface of used medical masks, which could result in self-contamination. Surgical masks were also found to be a repository of bacterial contamination. The source of the bacteria was determined to be the body surface of the surgeons rather than the operating room environment. Given that surgeons are gowned from head to foot for surgery, this finding should be especially concerning for lay people who wear masks. Without the protective garb of surgeons, lay people generally have even more exposed body surface to serve as a source for bacteria to collect on their masks. When it comes to cloth masks, healthcare workers wearing cloth masks had significantly higher rates of influenza-like illnesses after 4 weeks of continuous on-the-job use when compared to controls. The increased rate of infection in mask wearers may be due to the weakening of immune functions during mask use. Surgeons have been found to have lower oxygen saturation after surgeries, even as short as 30 minutes, and our children are wearing these all day. Oxygen levels and sunshine exposure are two of the most powerful indicators and influencers of your body's ability to naturally protect itself and stay healthy.
Thank you.
So let our children get that.
Our next speaker is Aaron King.
Good evening, everyone. Aaron King, 231 Aspen Boulevard. Not much of a speaker, but I have 4 children. 2 are in York County schools. One going into kindergarten, one going into 8th grade. And my problem with masks are, when my 7th grade son was coming home with headaches and having to run laps in gym class, and to the point of almost vomiting because he's running, sweating, saturating the mask. It's just not healthy. It really isn't. And At the time, my 4-year-old's going to Little Log Cabin, and she comes home crying, doesn't want to go to school the next day because she has to wear a mask. It's not, to me, it's just, the benefits don't, to me, it just doesn't make sense. And I would ask you guys to vote no on mask mandates, make it optional for people that have underlying conditions, and that's about all I got to say. Thank you.
Next speaker is Christopher Smith.
Hi, I'm Christopher Smith. I live at 112 David's Way in Yorktown, Virginia. I have one daughter. She'll be starting in York County Schools this fall. So I want to thank you guys for all that you've done the past year. You know, public health is a thankless job. If you do too little, people blame you. If you do too much, people blame you. You know, there's been a lot of comments, you know, tonight about how CDC changes their guidance back and forth. You know, that's kind of the very thing behind science and behind big data and machine learning, is that data constantly evolves. Science constantly evolves. Things we didn't test for 10 years ago, we now test for now. Diseases we didn't have 10 years ago, we have now. You know, so we're not just, say, following a crowd. We constantly want to learn and how better prepare for the future. You know, if we don't say we don't like the CDC, we'll then follow the American Academy of Pediatrics, who specializes in medicine and treatment of kids under the age of 18. You know, which is has consistently recommended from the very beginning for a mask for kids above the age of 2. You know, wearing a mask is difficult. I'm not gonna lie, I have glasses, I have allergies, and it sucks. You know, my glasses fog up all the time. My employer requires me to wear a mask all day, every day. But for the greater good, it's something that is worth it, because not everyone has been vaccinated. Some people have, some people haven't. But it's not just to protect myself, but to protect other people. You know, so even though we say transmission rates are low, and there's data to support that, transmissions still happen. As far as the mental health, you know, we love to see people's faces, we love to see people's expressions, but that doesn't mean we can't hear their tone of voices and hear the same reactions. You know, little kids being able to go into school and see their friends makes a huge difference. To be able to see their friends in a safe environment rather than having to stay home, I think makes a huge difference, but they have to be able to do that safely. You know, so I would ask there would be masks for the kids. You know, I would love for my daughter to go back to school and see her friends. And that's it.
Thank you. Next speaker, Delois Stallman. I apologize if I said that incorrectly. Okay.
Good evening. Thank you for the chance to speak to you about the mask vote tonight.
you can
Sorry,
state your
305 Chinkapin Orchard. I'd just like to talk to you about the fact that we're here to instill a love of learning in children. We're here to teach them how to be good citizens and participate in the act of citizenry when they are able to vote and when they're able to hold a job. We're talking a lot about random statistics, CDC. No matter what I say, I am not going to change a single person's mind in this room about what they think about a mask. I think your role is to instill a love of learning in each of the children in York County, and that's not being accomplished when you strap a mask to their face because they don't want to go. there's a 99% recovery rate from coronavirus. Virginia Department of Health commingles the confirmed deaths with the probable deaths, which results in a 15.58 increase in overall deaths in Virginia. But among children 19 and under, there have been a grand total of 111,000 cases and 9 deaths. That's probable and confirmed combined. So it could be as low as 0, but the maximum would be 9. That would leave you with a 0.00081% chance of dying of this. Somebody brought up other deaths, car deaths, drowning deaths. Drowning deaths are higher. Do we want all children 19 and under to walk around with a life jacket on, whether they can swim or not? That's stupid. If the school board's interested in health and wellness of children, consider handing out vitamins and nutritious food. York County does not exist in a vacuum, and there are school boards across the country and this world where children have been without masks. I haven't heard of a single school in this country that's been closed for a coronavirus outbreak ever. I would challenge anybody to show me one that's been closed. That hasn't happened. The kids get off the bus, they go play, they take the masks off. It's a facade, and the teachers go out for happy hour after school. I'm going to just respectfully ask you to think about instilling a love of learning in these kids and how forcing masks on children eliminates the possibility that they're going to do that. And if people want to wear a mask, God bless, but don't force these kids to wear the masks.
Kim Goodwin.
Good evening. My name is Kim Goodwin. I live at 309 Ludlow Drive in Seaford. I'm a parent of a rising senior and also a mental health therapist in the community. During this past year, I have counseled several depressed adolescents with suicidal ideation, more than I have ever counseled in my career as a counselor. Not a year, my career. I admitted teenagers to psychiatric hospitals and intensive programs due to attempted self-harm, all resulting from lockdowns, social distancing, wearing of masks, and somber, depressing environments when returning to school. Our children need to return to normalcy and by being unmasked this school year. We keep hearing the science says, but the powers that be have yet to produce any science that backs up their claims that masks and lockdowns work. However, quite a few infectious disease doctors and researchers have stated that masks do not work. When these same doctors and researchers are dealing with so-called dangerous viruses, they're wearing protective suits and headgear that allow them to actually have their own oxygen supply, because that's what you would actually need to do to minimize spread. You need to live in a bubble. The mask does nothing for protection. We have heard a ton of arguments to show you that masks don't do anything. They're actually more harmful. What it does do is it physically and psychologically hurts our children. By the way, there's also research to support this. Research has also shown that our children are not the ones that are vulnerable to catching COVID and its variants. If children do catch it, they recover quickly with minimal symptoms, so why make them suffer? As a mental health professional, I'm tired of admitting kids to psychiatric hospitals for self-harm and having to turn away families who need therapy for their kids because my caseload is beyond full. As a mother and a parent, I want my son's senior year to be normal. Wearing a mask is not normal, and it's not necessary. It's hurting our children, and it's doing nothing for the good of the cause. I feel that if a parent wants their child to wear a mask, they should have that right. If a teacher wants to wear a mask, that's their choice. Heck, if they want to wear a hazmat suit, I don't have a problem with it. But do not force those of us that do not want our child to be masked up to be forced to do so. Thank you.
Holly Sedlecki.
Hi, Holly Shedletsky, 111 Crest Lake Court, District 5. Did not plan on speaking this evening. I just came to hear everybody else. It's wonderful to hear all these different views. Wanted to share a quick experience of mine. My daughter Julia started Mount Vernon in a kindergarten in 2019. Of course, we all know what happened in 2020. My husband and I made the decision to remove her from York County Schools because we did not feel that a computer was going to be productive for a new learner, for a new reader. We enrolled her in a private school in Newport News, and I just wanted to share my experience with that decision. It's been wonderful. Fall of 2020, it was 100% in learning, in classroom, teachers. They did wear masks once the governor mandated it, but they were allowed to have mask breaks. They were allowed to remove them during gym class. They were allowed to remove them out on the playground. And let me tell you, out of the entire last year, 2 cases. 2. And it wasn't students and it wasn't faculty. We had to know because it was a family member of a child. So I look at the public schools and I haven't divorced myself completely of York County Schools. I'm here tonight to support my friends, my fellow mothers, and maybe one day looking to bring our children back to York County Schools. But I seriously hope I'm not standing here when my daughter graduates in 2032 pleading for you to give parents the right to choose to wear a mask and not co-parent with York County School Division. Please, be a leader. Follow the science.
Kristen Creel.
Hi, thank you for giving me the chance to speak tonight. I'm Kristen Creel at 412 Willards Way, Yorktown. I just wanted to share an experience to go along with my support of not wearing masks for next year or letting parents choose what to do. I'm a mother of 4, and I have 2 children that graduated from York County District in the past 2 years. So we've gone through the whole COVID thing with graduations. I have a daughter who has a medical condition, and she is lacking a protein that helps her body to produce glycogen, and so therefore her body doesn't get enough oxygen to go through all of that building up of muscles and everything. So I forced her to wear a mask this past school year. And during the school day, she wore a mask, and oftentimes she came home with a headache. She did develop some friendships in school, but I just wanted to make you aware that during the school day, they're also wearing masks while they're doing testing, while they're doing SOL testing. During the school day, they're also fiddling with their masks. As high schoolers, it's natural for kids to be in masks 7.5 hours a day. That also does not include them being on the bus ride there and from school. So it's natural for them to be fiddling with their masks. And then during testing, especially at the end of the year testing, SOL testing, being told not to play with their mask, and then also being told by certain people that are in the position of authority not to mess around with their mask. And then my daughter, who's on the spectrum, does not understand this. So she's wearing a mask and being told by people who have masks on, she ends up crying and finishing the rest of the SOL crying behind her mask. So these are the things that may or may not be aware of during, wearing masks. And so I just wanted to let you know. And also during PE, my younger child is running around wearing masks, doing PE, getting sick and having headaches and that kind of thing. So be aware of that and maybe mask breaks if you do absolutely have to go back in masks. Thank you.
That is the last of the people who signed up to speak for our public comment this evening. I now close the public participation. I'm sorry. While the public comment was open. If you would like to speak, we can get you a form and have you fill it out. The forms are just outside the doors. We'll take a 5-minute recess and then we'll begin again. Thank you very much. Late?
How many more you got?
Gotcha. Really? $30. All right. You're gonna give me a thumbs up? Let me know. Oh, I'll start with Adam. I'll start with Adam. There's a couple times I really had to check. There's a couple times I really did check my eye rolls and stuff. There's a couple times. All right, I'm gonna go. Mic's on? Okay, so 1 minute. Okay. We will begin the meeting again in 1 minute. Do I need to hit the gavel again to start it? I would tell them to hit the gavel and say we have 1 minute. Say that again. I bring our meeting back to order. We will continue and conclude with these final speakers that have turned in their cards. We'll start with Rebecca Griffin.
Hey, I'm new to the county. I'm at 118 Ridge Road. I just closed on my house on Valentine's Day before the pandemic hit. But I just wanted to share a couple things. You know, when this pandemic first came out, everybody took it serious. I run a heat and air business. I kept my dad, who's in his 60s, and my mom at home. I said, stay home. My husband and I will take care of the company. We'll run everything until we find out what's going on with it, okay? So we took it serious. Masked up, all that good stuff. But I knew masks from the beginning don't work. I've been selling indoor air quality products for over 20 years in HVAC, and in order to, stop the virus, you have to have what they call a MERV 13 filter to actually stop the virus. So it takes a lot to stop it because it's such a tiny virus. But I will say this, I don't agree with the mask mandate. I'm an American. I believe in freedom, and I believe in the Constitution gives us a right, especially as parents with our children. They're our children. They're not the community's children. That's communist. They are our children, and so I believe we have a right to our children, and I want my children to breathe, especially when I know that a virus goes right through the mask. MERV 13 filters in the building might solve a lot of problems because it's been wonderful. I mean, we have good air filtration at our house, and so if one person gets sick in the house, like nobody else gets sick because we keep our house clean and the air filters through it, and we're pretty good to go, you know what I mean? So I would just say, like, the parents, I think we should respect the parents' opinion and let the children decide with their parents if they're going to mask up or not, and if you feel that concerned about your child catching a disease, then maybe keep them at home. That's an option. We have the online learning. But I think the rest of these kids deserve to be children. My children have been cooped up in a house for over a year now, and they're not like normal teenagers. I mean, I hate to say it, but they need a life. They need to have their friends, and they need to go out and get an education. It just hasn't been a good past year.
Next speaker is Thomas Sager. Did I say that right? Sneer, I apologize.
Good evening. My name is Thomas Sneer. I live at 108 Sweet Bay Arbor. And thank you for just giving me a little bit of time and opening the floor back up for people. So in November, my whole family came down with COVID. We were quarantined through December and January. My daughter was diagnosed, which is sitting here, 17-year-old with stage 4 brain cancer. No treatment, no cure. So as you can see, the mask would be a hindrance to her because she needs oxygen to her brain as part of her survival. You know, I don't care how you vote. I would like you to do it optional. That's what's important to me. So I can send my children to school. I have 3 children. One goes to Grafton Bethel, is going to 1st grade. My son's going to 9th grade, and my daughter's going to 11th. During the whole time that we were quarantined, my 6.5-year-old never contracted the COVID at all. She's 6.5 years old, running around, playing. You know, the only thing that we had a problem with during COVID was one of your teachers on the virtual learning was promoting her whole hour, her whole block. She was promoting her own political agenda to my daughter every time. She was there, she was complaining and everything. So we addressed it once, figuring it would go away. Didn't go away. It continued. We watched my daughter every day on that class, and that one teacher continued pushing her agenda. And then we got a hold of the vice principal, because the principal wasn't there. And now I don't know if the teacher is still with York County School District, but it seems like she is no longer with the school district. But that was a continuous thing with us. And so my question would be, what will you do as a school board to stop teachers from pushing their own political agenda? Because it's not my 6-year-old. I'm terrified you're going to teach my children CRT. They don't need to know that they're oppressors because they're not. You know, and I don't need teachers out there telling my children, oh, COVID's doing this, COVID's doing that. I can't go home to my husband. I just got married. They're paid to teach a curriculum. They're not to push their own political agenda. So that's all I want to do with my time. Just put that on your plate. Thank you.
Robin Middleton.
Thank you for squeezing in an opportunity to comment. We've heard a lot of outstanding comments tonight on both sides, and I had some lengthier comments with clinical data to point out, but they've already been presented. So I just wanted to say, I'm a parent, number one. Number
Sorry, can you
two-
state your address? I apologize.
Oh, I'm sorry, 114 Poplar Point. I have concerns physical and psychologically as a parent. Secondly, I'm a retired hospital administrator with the U.S. Air Force. I served 24 years as a hospital administrator. I worked as an advisor for the Reserve Medical Forces to the Air Force Surgeon General. So I've worked in Washington, I've worked in healthcare administration, and I'm also an educator. I'm a part-time professor at CNU for communications studies. So with that said, and I applaud your efforts as leaders, as administrators. I know working with policy, keeping people safe is not easy, and leadership is not easy, and we all have to take hard looks in the mirror. But I think we can rest assured that we have a confident and a safe and a reasonable course of action in front of us, and that is to make masks optional. We know that children are at minimal risk for this virus. We know, as the mental health professional stated earlier, there are clear risks to anxiety, sensory deprivation. The sensory deprivation will impede pedagogically being able to communicate with them, instructor to student. So there are multiple concerns, physically and psychologically, that I have. But again, I would like to reiterate, we have a reasonable, safe course of action that will accommodate everybody safely. And our hearts are all in the right place. We all want the best for our children and safety, and we want them to return to normal and to thrive. So thank you for letting me.
Andrew Dixon.
Okay, hello, everyone. My name is Andrew Dixon. I live at 102 North Lakeland Crescent, Yorktown. So I am a current rising senior who currently attends TAB. I am also one of the people who attend New Horizons Government School. So I personally balance college classes on top of normal classes. And my experience this year with the mask mandates is it's kind of stupid. All right, so it's like, I also do sports and everything, so we don't have to wear wear a mask for sports and everything, so I'm glad that happened. So my point that I want to get across, that mask mandates, it needs to be optional, because like it doesn't work for some people. It's like we need to be in-person school. Online learning does not help. It was very, very hard to learn stuff through online learning. Like the entire first month until we went back to school, I don't really remember when we even went back to school. And that kind of is very frustrating, that like the entire year, like having to balance all the stuff and like having how hard it was to concentrate in school. And I can like give like on like behalf of the friends and everybody else who goes to my school of how hard it was to concentrate in school. And it's just like, nobody's learning anything. Like I have people telling me like, yeah, I don't attend online classes. I just game all day. Like, okay, what are you learning? And we need to be in-person school and have the masks optional. Thank you.
Mary Ellen Dixon.
Hi, that was my son. Proud of them. Proud of them both. I'm Mary Ellen Dixon, 102 North Lakeland Crescent. He's a senior, rising senior in TAB, and my other son will be speaking soon. He just graduated last year, and he has completed his first year of college at Regent University. I want y'all to know that if you want to follow the law, right now, masks are illegal for anyone over 16 years old. There is 18.2.422 that prohibits a mask for anyone over 16. It is a Class 6 felony. So just so you know the law, when the governor turned around and let his emergency mandate expire, masks became illegal. The only people who can wear it medically are ones who have a medical affidavit from a doctor saying they can wear a mask, and it's medically dictated. So just letting you know, my son wants to go to an academy. I work with Intel. He's probably going to work for cyber. You get to do a poly. The poly says, have you ever committed a felony? What do you answer? Well, I did it for the good of the community. Is that going to get you your job? No, bye. Okay, so now, going back to my second son. My oldest son has autism. If he had to turn around and survive the school years the way we have treated these kids, he wouldn't be in college. Speech therapy, how many speech therapists in here can work with a mask on? How can you enunciate properly? How can you turn around and see the formation of the mouth? Hearing impaired, sign language. You know what I've had people tell me? Oh, why don't you just wear one of those masks? I said, excuse me. I need to read your lips. Not you read my lips. Hearing impaired people need to read lips. How do they do that with masks? Kids who have hearing impairments, as my son does, needs to see the facial expressions, needs to see the mouth movements, needs to turn around and get the social cues from facial. That's not happening. Luckily, he went to Regent. My job during COVID was tracking Fort Eustis, all of TRADOC's cases across the active duty military. Guess what? How many deaths we had? 6. Counting reserves. We had to increase and count the reserves and National Guard. So really, we turn around, it's not working. Don't hurt the kids, take the mask off, it's optional. Thank you for your time.
Josh Thedford.
Hello, my name is Josh Thedford. My address is 108 Tannenbark Trail, Yorktown, Virginia. And first off, what I wanted to start off just to say is I live in the United States of America, land of the free and home of the brave. And the freedom that I have last year and in 2021 is, you know, what freedom do I have? Because I'm being forced to, you know, wear a mask, and I feel unsafe. You know, anybody can walk into a school right now with a mask on, and it's a school shooter, and nobody's going to be able to identify that person because, you know, their face is being covered. I can't wear a hat in school, but I can wear a mask. And I just don't understand. I think it's a great idea for it to be optional because I do understand some people want to feel safe and wear a mask. That's totally fine, but I feel unsafe wearing a mask. So I just don't understand why, you know, we're being forced to. And also just like my school went outside to walk a mile around the track. I wasn't allowed to take my mask off. We're outside. I was playing basketball in PE, and I had to wear my mask. It's just not fair. It's just absolutely unacceptable. And I mean, my teachers, I walk out of the classroom with my mask, you know, past my nose because I can't breathe. I'm getting lightheaded, right? And they tell me I have to, you know, put my mask back up. This is before the COVID-19 vaccine was put out, and I turn the corner, and there's 3 teachers standing without their masks on, talking to each other. And also, when we go to lunch and I'm hanging out with all my friends, I have to choose between my 5 friends who I want to sit with because there's 3 people out at each table. It's not fair. I want to be able to sit down with all my friends. I want to be able to interact with them. The anxiety I get from wearing a mask, the depression I get from wearing a mask because I can't see all my friends. I can't go up to my friend and hug him right now because the teachers will yell at me, and it's not fair. And they'll yell at all the students and turn the corner, and they have their mask off. They tell me to wear my mask properly, and, you know, the person that's telling me to wear my mask properly has their mask below their nose. It's just, I just don't get it. So that's all I have to say. Thank you guys for your time.
Miriam Augelo.
Hi, Miriam Angelo, 104 South Joshua's Way, Yorktown. We had a lot of great comments here. I just wanted to kind of say a couple of things. I'll be quick. My opinion, masks should not be mandatory. You know, we've had lots of great statistics that proved or made that point valid. They should be optional. The parents should be able to choose what they would like for their children, whether to wear a mask or not to wear a mask. One other point I wanted to make is, you know, when I was growing up, my parents always told me, if something goes on, if your doctor tells you you have a medical condition or what have you, let's get a second opinion. We trust the CDC, maybe we need a second opinion. Thank you.
And John Dixon.
Hello, is this on?
Yes.
Okay, John Dixon, 102 North Lakeland Crescent. I was a former senior that in this county. So imagine just a moment that you were a senior, ready to have the year of your life, and then you had that taken away from you and being treated like a slave. That's how I felt. 2020 was one of the worst years of my life. I had to wear masks. I had to be told to stay away from people and stay 6 feet. It was all a pain. And from everything I have seen stuff from last year that will make you question the very nature of humanity. That's right. And I am worried about the kids because I don't want them to suffer the same fate that I and my own class had to go through. Kids would be sweating and dying from running around in PE classes and going outside. And as a lot of speakers up here have pointed out, there are teachers that don't wear the mask and they caught them in the act. Whether things have been done about them, I do not know. But the fact is, I smell some major hypocrisy in the air. And I have to say, God bless my mom and anyone who was close to me, because if it weren't for them, I would probably lose my faith and probably be in a mental hospital. It was that bad. And I am worried because with online learning, people would cheat. People will not learn anything. And worst of all, teachers would have an opportunity to teach their own political agenda to children. And believe me, America does not need any more of these activists. So please make masks optional. I don't want children to have to suffer as I had to suffer. Masks are a pain. The lockdowns were a pain. Social distancing was a pain, and being treated like a slave was an absolute pain. Oh, and by the way, I went to a college that masks were optional, and guess what? I'm fine, my mom's fine, my little bro's fine, everyone who I met that was elderly was fine. And if that's not proof enough that there is major hypocrisy and that children are tired of being treated as slaves, I do not know what is. Good day.
I will now close the public participation for comments from citizens. We move on to our next section for the meeting for presentations. Our first presentation is a staffing fiscal year 21-22 update. Dr. Shandor, do you have additional comments?
We do. Thank you, Mr. Higginbotham, and good evening, board members. Dr. Vladu, our Chief Human Resource Officer, is going to provide an update to the board this evening on our staffing as of today. Dr. Vladu.
Mr. Higginbotham, members of the board, and Dr. Shandor, thank you for the opportunity to provide an update on staffing tonight. First, I would like to begin by sharing an update on licensed positions. At the elementary level, as of August 3rd, yesterday, we had 6 classroom teachers vacancies still left, 6 special education positions, 1 counselor position, 1 ESL teacher or English learner teacher, and 1 library media specialist. On this slide, I would like to share staffing levels at the secondary levels, our middle schools and high schools. As you can see, we're still hiring for 3 special education teachers, 3 English teachers, 3 Spanish teachers, 2 ESL teachers, or English learner teachers. Additionally, we continue to move forward hiring 1 science, 1 math, 1 CTE, 1 reading specialist, and 1 history and social science teachers. We're also hiring for other licensed positions at the secondary level, which include the 5 newly budgeted positions that came from the new standards of quality, which includes a school psychologist, 2 board-certified assistant behavior analysts, and 1 social worker. Lastly, we're in the process of filling the 1 instructional and an innovation coach, as well as a math coach. Again, a lot of these positions are in flux, and in the HR world, things are moving very, very quickly, and this data was fresh as of yesterday. At this time, I would like to share an update on our non-licensed positions. We're also in the process of hiring 41 paraeducator positions. On average, due to the Region 2 deadline for hiring teachers, hiring paraeducators happens later during the school year, or later, actually, before the school year begins. On average, we also have about 30 positions that are open as I looked at the data for the past 3 years at this time. While we're higher than the previous school year, the number of vacancies are expected to significantly reduce by August 30. At that time, I'll provide you with an additional report. As you can see on the slide, we're also working to fill 3 oral communication facilitators and 1 occupational therapist position. On this slide, I would like to share many of the mission-critical positions that support teaching and learning. First, as you can see, we're hiring for 14 bus drivers and an additional 14 custodian positions. While the number of bus driver vacancies had increased since last year, the number of open custodial positions has remained relatively the same. If you'll remember last year during this time, I presented that we had 13 positions that were open. Also, we're hiring 8 crossing guards, 4 maintenance and warehouse positions, 3 office clerical positions, 3 positions in IT, 3 cafeteria monitors, and 2 bus assistants. As you'll remember, we rely on our substitute pool to fill temporary vacancies as well as teacher absences. To that end, I'm pleased to report tonight that we have 271 active subs, 47 of which have been hired since the beginning of the year back in January. We're also supporting our schools this year by providing 1 building-based sub at each school. So each school will have 1 position in place that should a teacher call in, they're readily available to help out. And that will begin on August 30th. At this time, I would like to highlight some of the completed activities. Very early spring, I want to share that our school administrators and SBO staff did a phenomenal job at the Job Jamboree. At that time, they completed over 150 interviews, and we had more than 50 hires. We received positive feedback, and that really helped us fill some of our needs at that time. We received additional resignations and retirements since then, which is normal for that time of the year. And so last week, you may have seen this on Twitter, and certainly we advertised on social media. We held a couple of job fairs. We had one at the Grafton School Complex, and we had one in the Bruton Zone and Magruder Elementary. We continue to use social media and national sites. We're not leaving any stone unturned, and continue to be out there, be present, and reach out to folks to fill these positions. One other item I would like to touch tonight is that we have increased the number of provisional hires. I reviewed the data for the past 3 years, and we have hired over 51 positions. So folks with college degrees that are very close to meeting the requirements for full licensure, we've done more as a division, and these positions have been proven to be very, very helpful and very, very effective in our classrooms. So what are the next steps? We'll continue to advertise on TV and social media. Many of you that are watching the Olympics, you should have seen a YCSD commercial. Certainly, it's probably not the highlight of the Olympics, but we hope to get some attention there. We'll continue to have additional job fairs. Last year, we had, during the pandemic, we were out there, and we are beating the bushes to get candidates, and we did have a couple of hires. We'll continue to do that into September and October. We're also continuing to reach to recent college grads, particularly those folks that don't know what they're doing. For instance, they may have a degree in social science, may have a degree, as you can see, we have English teachers that we still need. And so we'll continue to reach out to our recent college grads, as well as career switching programs. Lastly, I want to thank the school board for approving a $400 bonus, referral bonus, which any YCSD employee can make a referral, and after the completion of training, and should that individual be successful, then they'll receive that referral bonus. So I want to thank you for the opportunity to provide this update to you. I'll provide another update in just a little bit over a week and continue to do that at our regular scheduled meetings. At this time, I am ready to take your questions and comments.
I know last year we hired classroom facilitators, and that was, if a teacher was having to teach virtual, they would stay in the building. Were we able to retain those folks in any capacity, either a substitute or hiring in another position?
That's a great question. So that was a need, as we're working through some staffing issue, that really filled the need when we had perhaps a teacher teaching from a different location into that. We've eliminated the need for that. We certainly build our substitute pool. Should we have those kind of situations, we can't rely on our subs, but it's been beneficial, but it's sort of run its course. This time, we no longer see a need for the position, but we'll monitor. If we do see a need, then we'll reopen that position.
And we can certainly follow up on that list of staff members to find out if they've accepted another position with the division. And we can send that in Friday notes.
But we are starting with one school-based sub for every school, correct?
Yes, sir. At all of our schools, we'll have one sub.
Okay. And you had mentioned the number of open positions this year compared to previous years was a little bit higher. What was that number you said again?
Certainly, that's a great question. I did look at our comparatively. I don't think last year was a good comparison simply because for the most part in the world of HR, people are staying put. So I compared it to 2019. We, at that point, had approximately 30 positions at this time that are still hiring for licensed positions. So we, as of yesterday, we're at 45, so we're higher. But again, just talked to my department today. We pushed 3 through today. We're averaging 2 to 3 per day, so we're going to close that gap. I think at the next update, I'll have more accurate information as it relates to the impact on the start of school.
Okay.
Are most of these first hires, this is their first job, or career switchers? Do you have any insight?
Most of our hires are mid-career professionals.
Okay,
We
all
have
right.
some new teachers, but we don't turn anybody away. If you're licensed and you're qualified, please apply.
And you did say 150 interviews for which you hired 50 or 51. Is that accurate?
This is, yes, from the Job Jamboree.
Okay, that's tremendous.
Yeah.
I'm going to bring you back to elementary school vacancies real quick. I know Tab Elementary had gaps at the 5th grade level. Are we closing on those? Give me a little bit of insight.
It's, elementary is one of the areas in the top 3 critical shortage
Sure.
areas. We're making some progress. Just last week, we're able to hire a provisional there.
Okay,
At
all
this
right.
point, because of the July 30th or the July 15th deadline, we can't take from any other school division, so
No.
really rely on people moving into the area. We rely on provisionals, we rely on
Career switchers.
career switchers.
Check.
So those are our main sources right now.
Okay, all right. And we've got obviously a fairly robust substitute pool in comparison to previous years, so.
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Anything else?
I would just add that to thank Dr. Vladu and the HR team. They've had many road shows this year. Those folks in his department have worked extremely hard, not only at the job fairs, but processing and going through the process of once somebody agrees to coming to the school division. They've done a fantastic job of getting these people turned around. And then the second group I want to shout out tonight is our principals and assistant principals. We've had them at Leadership Academy the last 2 days. We have one more day tomorrow, and many of them have to sneak out for an hour or 30 minutes here or there to do interviews. So when there's people available, they're dropping everything they're doing to bring on the best candidates to work with our kids. So certainly want our principals to know how much we appreciate them and as well as our assistant principals. Thank you, Dr.
Thank
Vladu.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vladu. Our next presentation is on the 21-22 school year planning. Dr. Shandor.
Thank you, Mr. Higginbotham, and board members, again, good evening. This evening, Dr. Carroll is going to provide some information this evening. Obviously, before he gets into the presentation, I just wanted to take a minute and we had about 520 or so public comments from last Thursday to, I believe, Sunday at midnight. Is that correct, Ms. Goff, around that number? So we certainly appreciate all the public comments that we received in that fashion. And also this evening, we had 30 or 31 of you that got up here and spoke. So I'm thrilled to have people come to these meetings and share what their views are and share their information. That is your right to come and do that, and we certainly appreciate that. With that said, Dr. Carroll is going to present some information. My only request would be to really focus and pay attention. There's a lot of detail that he's going to share this evening, so we just ask folks to just really pay attention to some of the information shared. And then at the end of his presentation, I will provide a recommendation to the school board, and then the school board will have their discussion, and then they will make a decision moving forward. With that said, I'll turn it over to Dr. Carroll.
All right, thank you, Dr. Shandor. Chairman Higginbotham, members of the board. Tonight, I bring you an update on the current status of the COVID-19 environment in our area and revised guidances that we're getting from different agencies. And as Dr. Shandor said at the end of this presentation, he will be giving you his recommendation for consideration. It should go without saying that at this point, we are fully committed to opening and maintaining a full and safe return to in-person learning 5 days a week, and that we will continue to layer our successful prevention strategies to protect those that can't or are not vaccinated. We also believe that we should add or remove these layers as needed, as we did last spring. As we look forward to the start of school, there are factors to continue to be aware of, which also align to the state's guide for local decisions regarding prevention strategies and school operations. We will review most of these tonight to varying degrees, and among those are the level of community transmission, the COVID-19 vaccination rates in York County, COVID-19 variants, level of school impact, implementation of mitigation strategies, and there are revised quarantine guidelines that you need to be aware of, which will impact in-place schooling, in-person schools. Now, here are the latest VDH school metrics. You've seen this graph before. You'll remember that these reports run 4 days in arrears, and unfortunately, they did not release a July 31st version. This is from July 24th. And also, we usually get availability to some locality metrics that we so that we can get a daily count of where we're at. And VDH decided to do some website maintenance today, so I do not have updated numbers for you there. But I will tell you that the last that we saw was Monday morning, and we were at 93 cases per 100,000, which is just below the cut line. If you look at the top graph, that would be right at the top of the orange below that reddish color. And so that is where CDC and VDH call high transmission of COVID-19. So we were at that point, and it has been going up. You'll also remember as you review this graph that the high point where you see it peak was from late January, and then you see a steep fall in cases on the back side of what was known as the third wave that was helped along by introduction of the vaccine. Then we bottomed out to nearly zero over the early summer. And then the rise started again around July 4th, and that it has continued to rise and appears to possibly be the beginning of a fourth wave. We do also have a new tool from VDH that tracks vaccination rates at different age levels. And these numbers here are as of this morning and have been growing incrementally over the last few weeks. It's important to note that some of the 18 and underage individuals could be students, or probably are, students leaving for college, or could be students that do not attend our schools. So there is some unknown here, but this is the best data that we have. Also, want to remind everybody of the vaccine guidance and its availability. CDC is recommending that everyone ages 12 and older get fully vaccinated. Vaccinations are readily available at most pharmacies and doctors' offices. And if you're not sure of where to go or you're looking for a particular vaccine, those resources can also be found at vaccinate.virginia.gov. We also spoke to the local health department this morning, and they confirmed the following facts for us, and so we are factoring that into our decision or our recommendation. With the Delta variant, they confirmed that it's more transmissible than earlier strains, that it can be transmissible by vaccinated individuals that are infected, and that it does impact younger individuals more so than the original strain. This is a graphic we haven't shared with you before, but it does, you know, you have heard from me talk about layering our mitigation strategies. The graphic demonstrates the various strategies that have been a core of all guidance from CDC and the Virginia Department of Health, which is that no single strategy is 100% effective, but combined they greatly limit the spread, so the more we can layer mitigation strategies, the more we can reduce the spread of the virus. And you see there's personal and shared responsibilities there, and there's plenty that you see that are familiar to you, and we've talked about that over the last year. Before I get into the other layers of mitigation, a reminder on current state guidance on physical distancing. You'll remember that last year, we couldn't start school in person due to two things. Number one was the recommendation to keep 6-foot distancing, which just didn't allow us to have everybody in school at the same time. And the second thing was that we had workforce limitations. We call those operational metrics. And so that was what kept us from getting started early on, and we progressed as the year went on. But here you'll see that the latest guidance is that, and I'm going to work up from the bottom, that when not possible to maintain at least 3 feet of physical distance, layer multiple other prevention strategies. The guidance now is do not exclude students from in-person learning to keep a minimum distance requirement. And so you want to implement physical distancing to the extent possible. And you saw us do that last spring, starting around March, and that's how we finished the year. But we had kind of committed to 4 days of school. We plan to continue mitigation layers with some changes. Number one, high contact surface. The concerns about infection from surfaces has been shown to be little to none, but we will continue disinfection of high contact surfaces based on the frequency of that will be based on the transmission levels at the time. We will, of course, keep hand washing etiquette. And then as far as shared materials, one of the things that we don't want to do is discourage the use of manipulatives, especially in elementary. And so instead of cleaning the actual manipulative, which will get cleaned, but what we're going to do on a daily basis is have hand washing before and after use so as not to discourage the use of the manipulative. We will continue to maintain our ASHRAE-rated ventilation systems, which certainly helped in moving the air in the buildings and helped keep the very low case count that we had. And I will remind the board, in the entire year, with the mitigation layers that we had, we only had 6 known transmissions within the building, non-athletic transmissions. We will continue encouraging staff and students to stay at home when sick and have families do their daily health screenings. And we will maximize the physical distance as much as possible while eating. And also continue contact tracing and quarantines. I talked a little bit earlier about the fact that there were revisions to guidance, and that has been something that we have had to deal with since the beginning of this pandemic. And so on July 21st, we received VDOE, VDH guidance that at that time pointed to the CDC guidance at that time. So this wording reflects that CDC guidance, that they strongly recommended elementary schools, including pre-K classrooms, implement a requirement that students, teachers, and staff wear masks indoors, regardless of vaccination status, until vaccination is available for students under 12 and there has been sufficient time for those children to receive that vaccine. And then as far as middle school and high school students, at that time, CDC was saying that they strongly recommended that middle and high schools implement, at a minimum, a requirement that students, teachers, and staff who are not fully vaccinated wear masks indoors. About a week later, CDC revised. And in this guidance, they recommended that universal indoor masking for all teachers, staff, students, and visitors to K-12 schools be the case regardless of vaccination status. So those are some of the changes that we've been reviewing. I also want to point to differences in quarantine guidance that we had from last year. You'll remember that even when the VDOE and VDH said that it was reasonable to bring students within a 3-foot distance, and you'll remember that's when we were able to bring people in 4 days a week. We still were quarantining at a 6-foot distance because that was the guidance at the time. So now there is different guidance. There is a revision. And on this one, I will also move from bottom to top on this first one. So for those people that are fully vaccinated, they will quarantine if they're symptomatic. Otherwise, they can wear a mask in public indoor settings for 14 days or until they receive a negative test result. And they also can start that testing 3 to 5 days after the initial exposure. And for non-vaccinated people, we will remain with a 10-day quarantine unless they are under the parameters of the new school exception that would apply. And so here, let me talk about that new school exception. So if you are in the presence or in the room with somebody and you're more than 6 feet, there's no quarantine. And if you are within 3 foot of that positive person, whether masked or not, for 15 minutes or more, then you would still quarantine as we've done in the past. However, now, when you're dealing with that 3 to 6 feet, which will be, is pretty common when we're talking about, sitting in a room and how close you are, and when we're aiming for about 3 feet, those people that are from 3 to 6 feet of an infected student are not considered a close contact as long as both students are wearing masks. And the school has other prevention strategies in place, which we would. Now, this exception does not apply to teachers, staff, or other adults in indoor K-12 settings because theirs is based on their vaccination status. But I want to really emphasize this because this is a factor that we have to remember. We're making a push to get students back in school every day doing everything else that they're used to doing pre-pandemic. But if you are in this situation of being 3 to 6 feet, if you're unvaccinated, both the positive person and the student who is exposed, if they're wearing a mask, then they would not be quarantined, which would keep them in school. And I would tell you that last year we did about 1,800 quarantines. And that, for each one of those, was 10 days in lost time as either a staff member or as a student. So this has a real effect on academics. I'll dig into this just a little more. The implications of the quarantine requirements in the school exception are that the more students who are vaccinated and or masked reduces the number of students missing in-person school. This chart should help illustrate the quarantine outcomes for individuals who are at least 3 to 6 feet from the case-positive student, but within 6 feet in scenarios in which individual mask choices are made. For example, even if a parent chooses to have their child wear a mask, if that child is identified as a close contact of another student not wearing a mask, they will still need to quarantine and miss school. There is also a risk to carry the virus back to family members, especially those who may have suppressed immune systems, such as the elderly or children under the age of 12 who are not allowed to be vaccinated yet. So let's go down to this one. This chart demonstrates that when students are at least 3 feet from the case-positive student, but within the 6 feet, the close contacts would not need to quarantine regardless of their vaccinated status. You'll remember the earlier slide I shared that demonstrated approximately half of YCSD students are not yet old enough to be eligible for a vaccination. And fewer than 2,000 people under the age of 18 in York County have been vaccinated. Even if we assume that everyone in that 12 to 17 age category of York County residents who have been fully vaccinated are our students, that means only about 15% of our students will come into the school at the beginning of the year vaccinated. And that means 85% will not be. And thus, this will be the impact and possible quarantine status within this distance. In regards to the process we use to evaluate and develop a recommendation, as I said to you, we had the initial guidance on July 21st, which was different than we anticipated at that time. We thought we were still dealing with a little bit of a July 4th spike. We gathered a team of administrators, both from the SBO and site-based staff, and we had teachers that represented all 4 zones. And as we got into that work, as we got into it immediately after the 21st, and we started to work through our Trigo Ed processes that we've talked about here before, then the CDC guidance dropped as we were doing that work. But as you know, with Trigo Ed, that involves weighing options against a constructed set of criteria. So we evaluated, and we evaluated 15 options in regards to masking, ranging from the most restrictive, that everybody in the building at all times will wear masks at all time, to the least restrictive, which would be voluntary for everybody. And we got those 2, and we got 13 other different models as we parsed different variables there: students, staff, visitors and volunteers, the ages of people, grade levels, and vaccination status. So we took those 15 different options and we weighed them against a set of criteria. And those criteria, I didn't list them all, but these were some of the most important. Are we meeting our federal and state mandates? Do we align to state and federal guidance? How does that option minimize the risk of transmission? How does it minimize student and staff absenteeism or just being out of the building? How does it maximize protection for vulnerable students and staff? And how does it maximize instructional best practices? And what I mean by that is having students in the classroom doing things they would normally do, doing collaborative work. And we heard a lot of people tonight talk about how hard it was working over a computer and not being in the building and not being social. And that is certainly not the best type of instruction, and we want to get back to where we were. At this point, I will turn the presentation over to Dr. Shandor for his recommendation.
Thank you, Dr. Carroll, and if you'll drive the rest of the slideshow for me, please. So I'm going to refer to my notes so I don't leave anything out. First, thank you, Dr. Carroll, and the rest of our team for their work reviewing state and federal guidance and working through a structured process to serve as the basis for my recommendation to begin the school year. I also appreciate the many individuals that took time to provide public comment, both tonight and through the extra step that the board provided to gain feedback online from those who could not attend this evening. Once again, before I share my recommendation, I want to remind our stakeholders of the priorities that underlie the recommendation. COVID-19 has changed many practices and processes for schools, but our commitment that safety is a top priority remains the same. The pandemic and subsequent state closings of schools has further strengthened our belief that the best educational experience for our students is in the classroom with a highly qualified YCSD teacher for 180 days a school year. Therefore, I believe it's my responsibility to establish plans that prioritize the safest environment for all students and staff that minimizes disruptions to in-person learning, whether that be due to individual quarantines, as you just heard Dr. Carroll share, shifts from in-person to virtual learning for classes, grade levels, and entire schools, even entire schools. As you know, the only full-time virtual option for our students this year is through the VDOE, Virginia Department of Education, virtual learning program. Our staff should and will be focused on implementing best practices in their classroom. So if a student is quarantined, while they will have access to Canvas in their assignments, we do not currently expect to have synchronous virtual instruction occurring during the school day. Finally, since the beginning of the pandemic, I should say, we have followed the guidance to the greatest extent possible. While the guidance continues to evolve, we will continue to adapt and adjust to meet the needs of our students, our staff, and our community by providing a safe and caring learning environment. After reviewing the work of our team, the state guidance, and most importantly, the potential implications to student quarantines and potential for students to be required to miss school, my recommendation will be to begin school year with masks required for everyone inside YCSD buildings and while on school buses, which is a federal requirement. Masks will not be, Board Chair, I would ask that we let the
Please, we ask that you remain respectful as we finish the presentation. We're going to take a 5-minute recess, please. I'm going to have to ask you to please be respectful. I bring this meeting back to order. Dr. Shandor, you can continue.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Higginbotham and board members. And I'll reiterate, as I was halfway through my recommendation, that my recommendation is simply a recommendation to the school board. So it's unfortunate that we had a disruption in the meeting, but the process isn't finished. The board has not yet had a chance to have a discussion and weigh in on what they will vote on. So I want to be very clear, as I was at the beginning of the presentation, that in this presentation, I'm giving a recommendation to the board, and then the board will have a chance to discuss, and then the board will weigh in on their decision. I hope that's clear. I believe where I left off was masks will not be required while eating, during recess, or when people are outdoors. Our team is exploring how we can expand these outdoor opportunities for students and staff to remove masks. In the interim, we will follow the practices that were in place during summer school, which are that when students are present inside buildings, masks are required for everyone. There are a few things I want to stress about my recommendation. The first being the phrase, begin the school year. While I recommend we start the school year with masks required indoors, I also recommend that I'm given the flexibility to increase or reduce mitigation masking requirements through the school year based on factors including but not limited to community transmission, student and staff attendance rates, and isolation and quarantine rates. I'm sure that leads to the question of what will drive a change in the masking rules. At this time, we don't have a set benchmark. But as vaccine rates increase and transmission rates in our community decline, we will continue to reevaluate regularly. And when I define regularly, that would be every 2 weeks. That's typically how we receive information from the VDH, et cetera, and then we will also have attendance data that we would report on. Finally, I want to share that there are points that have been raised in the public comments this evening, as well as personal emails I've received that, quite frankly, I agree with. However, this decision is not based on my personal opinions, debates on the survival rates for those who become infected, the effectiveness of masks, or any other debates. It's based on our ability to bring all registered students back into their classrooms with their teachers and keep them in their classrooms. So long as quarantines from virus exposure are necessary, we must implement every strategy at our disposal to minimize the need to exclude students from school. Mr. Higginbotham, this includes our presentation and my recommendation. And I want to thank Dr. Carroll and his team for all the work that went into the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. We are in need of a motion and a second to approve the recommendation before we can discuss it. Recommendation to move or second it enables discussion. It is not an endorsement of the recommendation. Do we have anyone who will move and second the recommendation of the superintendent to begin the school year with masks required for everyone while inside YCSD buildings and while students and staff are on school buses? Masks will not be required while eating, during recess, or when people are outdoors. Also allowing the flexibility for the superintendent to alter mask requirements throughout the school year as circumstances warrant.
I move that we approve the recommendation and move forward with discussion.
Is there a second?
A second.
Okay. All right, we have a motion and a second. So now, as board members, we can discuss the recommendation. I don't mind starting for the recommendation. Myself, as a school board member, our expectation is to ensure that we provide the best educational opportunities for all the students. And we've made a concerted effort to say that that is in class, inside the schools with the teachers, 5 days a week. And to me, masking is what keeps people inside that building. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Carroll and Dr. Shandor. If someone is unvaccinated and they're at school in close contact without a mask, unvaccinated without a mask, and they're in school in close contact, they will have to be quarantined 10 days.
If they are unmasked, masked or unmasked, within 3 feet, they would have to be quarantined.
Okay, so masked or unmasked.
Right. From 3 to 6 feet, then it would depend on the masking of the positive case and the other student. If they are both masked, then they do not have to be quarantined. And then, of course, 6 feet and out
Okay.
wouldn't be subject to a quarantine.
Okay, so my concern is if we send whatever grade level back to school, and if a kindergartner, first grader, has to then be quarantined within the first week of school or the second week of school without the ability to be in the building with the teacher, that's detrimental to their educational experience, not being able to have that FaceTime on the computer or in person. Okay, I would ask that you keep your comments quiet, please. This is time for the board to discuss the recommendation. That's the sort of how I feel, and we've continued to follow the American Academy of Pediatrics and the CDC's recommendations. I am not a medical expert. I don't present myself to be a medical expert. I'm an educational expert. I've been a teacher for almost 20 years. I know what goes on in the classroom. I know what it's like to teach virtually. I know what it's like to teach in person, and it's most ideal to teach them in person with a mask or not. Okay, those are my thoughts. Any board members else like to chime in or respond?
I certainly appreciate your position on that, and I want to thank Dr. Shandor and especially his team that did the Trago Ed. I know they spent a lot of time and got a lot of different information as they were working on it, just like all of us have throughout this pandemic. It's changing daily. I came in tonight with an opinion, and that opinion has not changed, even with the disgruntlement and everything here. I'm not a big supporter of of students going back to school wearing masks. I've talked to medical personnel, I've talked to teachers, and neither one of those professions can agree on a mask. The federal government only made a mandate on buses, and that was, I guess, because students are so close sitting side by side, and we have to because it's public transportation. I beg to argue that, but I understand it, I get it. The state government didn't set a mandate. The federal government hasn't set a mandate. Even the CDC strongly recommended masks on the 21st of July. On the 24th of July, they recommended. They took the word strongly out. I just think it's a parental choice. I think the parents need to decide, but that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Anyone else? Mr.
Okay.
Schaefer, you had something to say?
Thank you. Yes. First, I'd like to thank all the respondents to the survey, the 520, I believe it was. And I thank all the ones that had the courage to get up and speak tonight, especially the students, because you adults think it's so tough to stand up in front of crowds and do it. Think about being back in high school and having to do it. There were many, many thoughtful comments, which is what I would expect from the York County School District parents. I appreciated them all. I appreciated the professionalism. We are not Loudoun County. We are not Virginia Beach. People know how to conduct themselves in York County, and I thank you for that. But thank you, Dr. Shandor and the whole team for their research and their recommendations. I listened to the constituents in District 1. In District 1, we are very opinionated, and we are very passionate. And the respondents to the survey were almost 2-to-1 in favor of not masking. And I intend to follow their direction and ask that masks be optional. It's my conviction to start with mask use optional while giving parents the information necessary to make the correct decision for their family. We should then evaluate performance, as Dr. Shandor said, at set intervals every 2 weeks in order to stay on the right track. I feel we all need patience and understanding as things quickly may change. This could all be a moot point if the governor says, no, it's masks for everybody, just like last March when he said the schools are closed. We had no choice. We don't have a choice if the governor says that. Thank you, District 1, for allowing me to represent you, but I'm looking at masks being optional. Thank you.
You know, I'd also like to start my comments, and I'm going to narrow my comments to something what I believe to be very, very practical, and I do believe this is somewhat of a practical decision, although it does certainly include safety. and transmission and safety of the community for that matter. But again, thank you for your observations and your insights and your data points. And as members of the board and the superintendent have said, we greatly appreciate your willingness to come out and share in a constructive manner. It means a great deal to me, I know, and it means a great deal to the board. As Mr. Schaefer mentioned, I weighed my constituents' comments. The breakout wasn't as strong as that. It was a little bit more even. But again, those several hundred or over 500 comments were very important too. You know, I made mention of what's practical. We obviously, none of us want to return to the situation last year. We all appreciate that. And when I say practical, I'm weighing these variables and I'm making some assumptions as we move down this path. First and foremost, we're dealing with the Delta variant, considerably more transmissible, and we know that likely the data is beginning to show, there's not a lot of data, but the data is showing more harmful, particularly younger population. The other issue too is we're introducing thousands of adults and kids back into the buildings. We've not encountered that in 18 months. And we're doing it with very likely more surge or worsening conditions here in the very near term. I think it not practical, I think it too risky, and I'm erring on the side of caution because my primary concern is that we keep the kids or the students and children inside the building. I'm very, very concerned of the constraints with regard to quarantine, the existing protocols. Our hands are somewhat tied, and frankly, we're going to have disruption to learning continuity and the operational continuity, and that's my greatest concern. So I'm recommending, I support the superintendent's recommendation, and I frankly don't think it will last very long. I think we're looking at perhaps 6 to 8 weeks. We are on the front end of the surge, and I think that we need to be very cautious. I'm perhaps a little bit more risk averse, but I've made some assumptions. Again, we're dealing with the Delta variant. We're introducing thousands of people back into the buildings, and I'm a lot concerned about operational continuity and also learning continuity. We've got, as you guys know, have traction, particularly in this first 6, 8, 12 weeks of school, to make our assessments as to where our learners are, and then to begin or implement the learning continuity and plans. And I'm concerned that the disruption will set us back. So thank you.
Ms. Graltz.
Sure. So again, I also appreciate all the work that the team did in putting all this together. I know it was extensive. I know it was dealing with moving targets as things got updated. And again, I appreciate the work that went into the recommendation. I also appreciate all of the comments in the survey. I read every single one. I've had people in District 3 reach out to me by email, by phone, stopping me in Food Lion, stopping me at Plaza Azteca and having conversations. And I was elected to represent those individuals. And ultimately, what my personal thoughts are don't necessarily matter as much as the constituents that I represent. They elected me and trusted me to make good decisions and listen to what they have to say. And so if I look at all the survey data and the people that talked to me, it was overwhelmingly in favor of starting the school year with masks being optional. That is where I'm leaning. And the reason I'm leaning that way is because, again, I also think that we don't know where this is going, but families have been robbed of a lot of choices over the past 18 months. I know as a parent of a senior, I was robbed of some choices. I went with the flow, and I was flexible, and I was able to, again, keep my kid in school and do what needed to happen. When I say my choice would be to have mass optional at the beginning of the school year, I agree that we need to look at it every 2 weeks. We were flexible last year. I know the board was in constant discussions to figure out what to do every couple of weeks and make decisions on the fly. And so I recommend that we do that again as well.
We have sort of, over the last 18 months, we've sort of adopted the crawl, walk, run method with it. And I believe to our, I wouldn't say good luck, but we had students back earlier last year than most school divisions on the peninsula and kept a large majority of them in the buildings. And we did it through our mitigation strategies. And I would be nervous with abandoning some of that and going from crawl, walk, run, going back to almost a full sprint to start the school year. To me, it sounds if we were going to vote on the recommendation as it was, there would be conflicting ideas and things like that. So I would consider or entertain discussion towards amending the recommendation for 11 and under, since there is no vaccine option, to continue masking, but continue to look at the metrics and recommendations of health professionals. And then 12 and older to possibly be optional at that point. Strongly recommend non-vaccinated students and adults to mask in the building. That's just a thought. It's sort of maybe some middle ground between what we've heard. I mean, I read all of the recommendation, or all of the emails that we received, all of the survey feedback, and you know, I heard things on both sides. Again, my big thing is I want to keep the kids in the building. Last year, we were told, get the kids back in school, get the kids back in school, and that's what I want to do. I want them to be there and to keep them there. So I don't know, just what do anyone feel like about that?
So, Board Chair, I certainly appreciate your comments on that, and I certainly understand them. But again, I'm still with parents need a choice. We're doing other mitigation standards. You know, we're still cleaning. We're keeping the distancing that we can. We can't do that on a bus, and we're mandated by that by the federal government, and that's okay. That's fine. That's what we got to do. This is ever changing. I think it's actually too early to make this decision. This could change and be a moot point in 3 weeks. That there's no spike, there's nothing there. It could be there's a heck of a spike, we've got to do something else. The governor steps in, he makes a decision. There's so many variables that can happen because we've seen it in the last 18 months. We've just seen it change so much back and forth. So I'm just still in my same position that I would entertain a motion to make it a parental choice for masks in school. And those that certainly would like to wear them would be able to wear them in school. That's still where I'm at.
I would just offer the primary means for protecting the unvaccinated, and particularly our youngest learners, as we know, is to surround them with those that are vaccinated, and masks as the primary mitigation factor. And I just want to reinforce that, but I certainly understand the perspective.
I'm still with the same stance that I was when I spoke just a few minutes earlier. And again, it's not out of disrespect to Dr. Shandor or any of his staff. That is certainly not what I'm trying to do. One of my concerns with doing the split is because in the middle school, you've got that age range right at the beginning. So we'd have half the school that would be voluntary and half the school that wouldn't. And I don't know that that's the right answer either. So that's the reason I don't want to go with the split.
Yeah, I was in 6th grade when I was 11 years old. Yes.
The way that I'm looking at it is that the youngest that we have are the least ones to transmit and the least to get it. And I think that masks are probably the most constraint on them rather than anyone else. So no, I wouldn't change.
Okay. So as the motion as it stands on the floor is the superintendent's recommendation without any amendments, which is to start the school year with masking.
So you need a new motion.
Or to
amend it.
Or to amend it.
Do you want to make an amendment?
Yes.
Okay. I can.
Yeah, you go ahead and do it.
Okay. Board Chair, I would like to make an amendment to the motion that was originally presented by the superintendent, his recommendation to allow masks to be optional, that parents make the choice, students make the choice on masking within our schools at the beginning of the school year as it stands right now. And again, we'll continue to look at mitigation standards, we'll continue to look at rates, we'll continue to look at everything. But right now, I think that's for everybody. And we still have to do the masking on the buses. I mean, I understand that. So it would just be within our schools that masking be optional. Is that a clarification enough, Dr. Shandor, or do you need it more specific?
Well, I and staff will need clarification on decision-making moving forward. If the board is going to go in this direction with voluntary, then what is your expectation for me? What is your expectation for staff to bring you information every 2 weeks so that
Just
you
like
can
we-
make a decision as we move forward? Because in this recommendation, as it's currently written, I won't have the flexibility to make the decision. It is now the board's decision each time. So I just want to make sure that my team is clear on where we're headed with that.
Correct. And I'm good with the way we did it before with the end of the school year with decisions that we made. You kept us updated every 2 weeks. I'm good with that. Is that good with you? Everyone else on the recommendation that's in support of the mask as a choice?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So do we have a second for the amendment?
I'll second.
Okay. So the amendment we have is to make masking optional at all grade levels
At all grade levels.
for students and staff.
And staff.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm going through my Robert's rules in my head to make sure that everything's, on board and done legally. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Berry. So we need to then vote on the amendment and then vote on the recommendation as amended.
Correct.
Separately, correct?
Correct.
And this does include optional for unvaccinated faculty.
Or
and staff.
vaccinated. It's optional.
Yeah.
It's optional
Okay.
for anybody, according to my understanding.
Right.
That's my
With the
understanding.
exception of transportation.
Yes.
Right.
Bus,
Correct.
bus, van,
As mandated.
transportation. things
Public
like that, 'cause
transportation.
that's public transportation.
Correct.
Okay,
As defined by the federal government.
okay. So just one more time, I want to state the amendment motion as I believe I understand it to make sure we're doing that we're doing it correctly.
Right.
The motion to amend the recommendation to allow masking be optional at all grade levels for students and staff, and require the masking on the public transportation as a state mandate.
As the federal.
Federal
government.
mandate.
Federal mandate, I'm sorry, yes.
Correct.
I do have one other question, Ms. Berry. When the state legislature passed that we had to have in-person instruction for the 21-22 school year, there was something in there about, to all practicability, that we should comply with the CDC guidelines. So I just want to make sure that we are in alignment, so that we are, the flexibility we are thinking about is technically legal.
The guidance was, to the extent practicable, to comply. And if the board feels this is to the extent practicable, then we'd be complying with what they have strongly recommended.
They just recommended, though, in the last one, they took the strongly out.
Recommended.
Okay. All right, just wanted to make sure we have that. So we have that motion and a second.
Mr. Higginbotham?
Yes.
I think what we need to do is go back and vote on the first recommendation first, and then, because it's going to be, it won't really be the superintendent's
No,
recommendation.
because we have to,
So let me be clear of what we're understanding here for the notes.
Sure.
What is the language that we have right now is that you're asking to amend the superintendent's recommendation. But that's really not the action. It should be whether you're voting on the superintendent's, the motion that was before was to move on the superintendent's recommendation, not to change the superintendent's recommendation.
So, and that's the shift in authority that you were discussing.
No, we have a.
Unless we're rewording it, but that's what I'm
You're
saying. The
gonna reword it.
Then
wording
it
that
go-
we have right now is not clear for us to do this correctly.
If you're amending the superintendent's recommendation, it's no longer my recommendation.
Correct.
So to me, it sounds like, process-wise, the board needs to vote on my recommendation and then come up with their own and move forward. Melanie, then if you could
But
provide some legal
it's still-
guidance.
You're still your recommendation. They're amending your recommendation to what they wish it to be. And they vote on the amendment first, so whether they agree on the amendment to the recommendation, and then they will vote on the recommendation as amended. So my reading of the amended recommendation would be to approve the superintendent's recommendation on mask requirements as amended, to begin the school year with masks optional for everyone while inside YCSD buildings and required while students and staff are on school buses. Masks are not required while eating during recess or when people are outdoors, which, in case you wanted to wear masks, it wouldn't be required anyway. and then they would stop right there.
So we're voting on the recommendation first, then the
You vote on the amendment.
We're voting on the amendment.
Amendment.
Is that the
And then
amendment
the
that you
recommendation
want?
as amended.
As amended, correct.
As amended. Ms.
Okay,
Ford.
Melanie, would you go ahead and read that once again, please? And then we're going to go ahead and I'm going to get a first and a second, and we'll take a poll on that.
So the amendment would be to begin the school year with masks optional for everyone while inside YCSD buildings, and masks required while students and staff are on school buses. Masks not required while eating during recess or when people are outdoors.
Okay, so we already had a first and a second on the original agreement.
No, they already have a first and a second on the amendment.
Okay, so I will go ahead and take a new first on this agreement. Mrs. Geralds, in a second.
I'll second.
Mr. Schaefer, second.
Mr. Schaefer? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do a roll call on the amended motion. Mrs. Geralds?
Yes.
Mr. Schaefer?
Yes.
Mr. Myatt?
No.
Mr. Richardson?
yes.
And Mr. Higginbotham?
No.
No. Say, the vote did pass with 3-2. Okay?
Now the board is in need of a motion and a second to,
Well, we already have the motion and the second. So
Okay.
now we have the amended
so now we vote on the amended
version
of the recommendation,
superintendent's recommendation.
Voting for the same
which
thing.
is,
Yeah.
which is voting for the same thing.
Okay,
Okay.
Melanie, would you like to read that once again? Thank you. Because you have the language in front of you.
The motion was to approve the superintendent's recommendation on mask requirements as amended to begin the school year with masks optional for everyone while inside YCSD buildings, and masks required while students and staff are on school buses, masks not required while eating during recess or when people are outdoors.
Okay, so I need a first and a second. Mrs.
Okay.
Geralds? A
I'll
second? Mr. Schaefer? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do a roll call. Mr. Richardson?
Yes.
Mr. Myatt?
No.
Ms. Geralds?
Yes.
Mr. Schaefer?
Yes.
Mr. Higginbotham?
No.
The motion passed 3-2. Thank you.
We do have one more action item for our agenda, a consideration of approval of the fiscal year 22 pay plan update. Dr. Shandor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Richardson and board members. We have one, who did I say? I apologize, it's been a long day.
It's all right.
Mr. Higginbotham and board members. Dr. Vladu has some information he is going to present to you this evening related to FY22 pay plan updates.
Mr. Higginbotham, members of the board, and Dr. Shandor, tonight I bring two proposed updates to the approved FY22 pay plan. The first proposal is the pay plan for school nurses. The Code of Virginia requires each school board to hire and employ qualified school nurses. As the school division works to hire and retain these qualified staff, a compensation review was requested from the Department of School Administration during June 2021. This review found that the midpoint for compensation for school nurses to be below 5% from the market average. As you'll remember, the market average are our neighboring school divisions on the peninsula and the south side. So to remain within 5%, which is a strategic goal, or the market average at midpoint, we recommend regrading the school nurses from grade 22 to grade 24. The second proposal I bring to you tonight is a hiring bonus for school bus drivers and assistant school bus drivers. As I presented during the staffing update, as of August 4th, or today, we have 14 bus driver vacancies. So a compensation review of bus driver pay was requested in June, this past June, and found the pay to be competitive as we look at other neighboring school divisions, both on the peninsula and the south side. However, the same review found that several school divisions in the comparative market are offering sign-on bonuses for bus drivers and bus driver assistants. So as the school division works to fully staff bus drivers and bus driver assistants, the addition of a sign-on bonus will ensure YCSD remains competitive. As we look at bonuses, they are an effective strategy to compete for a limited number of bus drivers on the peninsula. So as several school divisions are offering hiring bonuses that range between $250 to $1,500, we are recommending that bus drivers are provided with a $500 bonus upon completion of training. 6 months after they complete the training, we recommend that they get an additional $1,000 for a total of $1,500 sign-on bonus. We're also recommending that bus driver assistants get a $250 bonus at the completion of training and an additional $250 after 6 months from the completion of training. So based on these factors, we're recommending the approval to increase nurse compensation from grade 22 to grade 24, and bus driver and bus driver assistant bonuses or sign-on bonuses. We're also recommending that these changes, if they should be approved, become effective July 1, 2020. So again, they're retroactive to this year, which is the hiring year for these positions. At this time, I'm completed in my presentation.
I do have a quick question. You talked about the sign-on bonuses for the bus drivers and bus driver assistants, and I know we have it, but I don't remember the numbers. A referral program for the current bus drivers who would not be eligible for that, but they could get a referral bonus. Is that correct?
So certainly, I believe back earlier in the year, you approved $400. This is a referral bonus. So anyone, an employee of YCSD can refer an individual who for training, and when they complete that training and they are successful, and after 6 months on the job, they'll get a $400 referral bonus. This bonus is different, is that for the individual that is being hired, if they complete the training as a bus driver, they'll get the $500 in 6 months. After that, they'll get an additional $1,000.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
You said at the end it was going to be retroactive to July 2020?
No, correction, it's July 1 this year. So
Oh,
we're
okay.
looking at the folks we just hired, a few weeks ago, and we haven't had many that we hire. We still have quite a few to hire that we're recommending that it is effective July 1 this year.
Okay.
So I guess it's almost like extending that bonus that we gave our teachers and other employees last year to the bus drivers this year as a sign-on basis.
Certainly, that's a great way to
Another
look
way
at
to
it.
look at it.
Yes, that's a great way to look at
Great,
it.
thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Yes. Dr. Vladu, was there anyone, I don't want someone to slip through the cracks that we hired like from the end of school till July 1st. Did we have any of those?
We have, if I could say that we have almost none, 1 to none bus drivers that we
Okay,
hired since
like I
that
said, I
time.
didn't want someone to sign on with us early.
Yes,
and
we-
then not be able to get the bonus.
Certainly, we do not have
Yeah.
many during that time, but again, if we do have some, and we have it really in the single digits, but I'm not aware of many hires since
Okay.
that time. We still have to fill this critical vacancy to ensure that we have our transportation run smoothly.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? Thank you very much, Dr. Vladu.
Thank you.
So we are in need of a motion and a second to approve the fiscal year 22 pay plan update.
Board Chair, I recommend that we approve the FY '22 pay plan update as presented by Dr. Vladu this evening.
Okay. Ms. Ford? Oh, a second,
I
I'm sorry.
second?
We have a motion and a second. You can pull the board.
Yes, a motion was made by Mr. Richardson and seconded by Mrs. Geralds to approve the FY '22 pay plan updates, and you may cast your votes.
My computer died, so can I give you my voice?
Yes, you can.
Yes.
Okay, the motion passed 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
That is.
Yeah, I was just gonna say we don't have any more information. Thank
That
you.
is the last item on our agenda for this evening. I want to thank everybody One more time for the comments on the survey, for coming out and providing public comment. Again, thank Captain Hahn and Major Montgomery and the York County Sheriff's Office for being here, and for Dr. Shandor and your staff for all of the presentations and detailed information that you've provided. As a reminder, our next regular meeting will be August 23rd, right here at York Hall at 7 p.m. Thank you. Have a great week.